got the idea more than 30 years ago. I need to count a minute. Yes, it's well over 30 years ago. It was Copernicus's 500th birthday. And there was big excitement in the nerd press, magazines I know you share with me, like Sky and Telescope, that made Copernicus the cover story in February 1973. And in that issue was an article by Edward Rosen, a historian of science, about how Copernicus got talked into publishing his insane idea. This was something he had come up with as a young man and circulated to other mathematicians he thought would be interested. And he said in his letters to them that he was working on a big book that would explain the whole thing with mathematical detail. And then the book never appeared. Decades went by, and he kept his silence. And then, when he was 66 years old, a young genius came to visit him, only 25, a mathematical prodigy, who had heard about his work and arrived unannounced and convinced him to do what he had avoided doing for a lifetime. So the visitor stayed with him for 2 years, helped him whip the book into publishable form, and then took it to Nuremberg to be printed. And it was the book that turned the universe inside out. It was that book's teaching that got Galileo into sensational trouble in the next century. And people are still captivated by Copernicus's book on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres. The last time a copy came up for sale at auction, it went for over $2 million. So, I'm saving my pennies. I really don't want to own a copy of On the Revolutions. I don't think it would belong in my damp, drafty house, but I love the idea that it is still an iconic book. And hearing the story, hearing how the book came to be, I thought, somebody should write a play about this. This is such an unlikely situation. You have these two characters, they're very different ages, different backgrounds. One is Catholic. Copernicus worked for the Catholic Church in Poland, and his visitor, Rheticus, came straight from Martin Luther's own university at Wittenberg, at the height of the Protestant Reformation. In fact, Copernicus's bishop had outlawed, banished all the Lutherans. So this fellow was actually an illegal alien. And somehow Copernicus managed to keep him there for 2 years, flouting the law and getting the book finished. So everyone knows that the meeting took place. There are various kinds of historical documentation of their collaboration. But nobody knows what they said to each other. And that was what interested me so much. And I thought it would be a great play to reimagine that conversation. And I tried thinking about it, but I really didn't know anything about playwriting. And I put it aside, but I never really forgot about it. And I find, I'm sure some of you will agree with me, that one of the nice things about getting older is that you get braver. You know, what have I got to lose? I could learn how to write a play at this point. And the event that really pushed me to write the play was my mentor and friend Owen Gingerich at Harvard. He got very interested in Copernicus's book, also around the anniversary, thinking how Copernicus had been criticized by some writers for being boring. It's a great big book. It's 400 pages, and it's about as gripping as a geometry textbook to read. And Arthur Koestler, in his book The Sleepwalkers, had dismissed Copernicus and his book, saying it was so dry and boring. It was really the book that nobody read. And Owen figured at least 9 or 10 people had to read it. And he knew who those 9 or 10 people had to be. And he was on sabbatical in Edinburgh, and he went to the observatory library and asked them if they had a first edition Copernicus for him to look at. And as he paged through it, he noticed that the copy was annotated throughout. Somebody had written in the margins all through the book. And he thought, what are the odds, if nobody read it, that the first copy I come across has been not only read, but studied? And this set him off on what he called his great Copernicus chase. And over 30 years, he tracked down 600 copies. So that's the first and second editions of On the Revolutions, both printed in the 16th century. And he studied who wrote what in the margins and identified whole schools of thought that had been copied from book to book. And he was able to prove that everybody read Copernicus. And so he was writing up his own experiences of these travels through countries. And of course, as he became more and more familiar with individual copies of the book, auction houses would call him in if a copy came up for sale, just to have him examine it and make sure it was legit. And sometimes he would have to say, I know that copy. That must have been stolen from the library in Naples. And so he got involved with Interpol, and identifying detective stories. So he wrote a wonderful book called The Book Nobody Read. You have to be brave to title your book The Book Nobody Read. For a while I thought of calling the play The Book Nobody Read, but I could already envision the nasty comments like the play that nobody saw, so I didn't go there. But he asked me to read his manuscript before publication. This was around 2003. And reading his adventures, I got excited about the idea all over again and convinced myself that I could learn how to write a play. And so I began by doing the same sort of research I would do to write a book and trying to bring the character of Copernicus alive. He didn't leave a lot of letters. Compared to Galileo, who left more than 1,000 letters, Copernicus left only 17. So that's a problem right there. And for example, he had a female housekeeper, and 3 of the 17 letters concern the bishops pressuring Copernicus to get rid of the housekeeper. And he resists that. He finds one excuse after another to keep her on. So what does this mean? Is he just good-hearted and can't let her go? Is he in love with her? And that was a decision that it took me a long time to make, because usually I write nonfiction, and I have to think, what would Copernicus say to me if I gave him a liaison that he never really had? But a wise director finally convinced me that if he wasn't really in love with her, there was nothing at stake in having to send her away. And so I had better just get used to that idea and include it in the play. It has been extremely difficult to put words in the mouths of real people. This is frowned on in my profession. But as a playwright, I had new license. And because I did so much research, including 2 trips to Poland, one of the best things that happened to me was on another eclipse trip, not the one with Dr. Duncan. I went from the Galapagos to the middle of the Pacific Ocean to see an eclipse that had only a 37-second period of totality. And on that trip, I met a Polish mining engineer. And the first night I happened to be talking to him, I mentioned that I would be visiting his country, that I was working on a project about Copernicus. And he said, "Oh, you must give me the dates of your travel. I'll get the time off work, and I'll be your translator and guide." And he did that for me twice. And although he refused any payment, I like to think I made it worth his while, because one of the things that happened was that we actually got to see the manuscript of On the Revolutions. The handwritten manuscript survives to the present day. This is very unusual. None of Galileo's manuscripts survive. So if the book, of which there are more than 600 copies, sells for $2 million, what is the original manuscript worth? So you will not be surprised to hear they keep it in a vault, in a temperature and humidity controlled environment, and they don't take it out very often. So this was a major coup to be able to see it. And as I was working on my play, which my kind-hearted publisher was willing to publish, I told him that I was doing so much research that I was gathering material, background material, that I could give to the head of a university theater department, in case they were interested in putting on my play. They would have all this background, and they could run a wonderful interdisciplinary project for students in early modern history, astronomy, foreign language. It could be very yeasty. And he said, "Well, why don't you take all of that material and write a book? Write a book around the play so that you build up, give all the background and how Copernicus came to this idea, and take it up to the point of the visitor's arrival. And then you have the play where you imagine what their interaction was like. And then pick up the narrative again and trace the book through history to the present day." And that seemed like a great idea. And that's how it turned out. The book is called A More Perfect Heaven. And the book has in it a version of the play, which was as good as I could get it. And I felt it really worked in the play to humanize Copernicus and to show a modern audience how genuinely difficult it was to accept that idea. That it isn't that people were stupid in the 15th century. This was a difficult concept. And but I was wanting the play to go farther. And because Stephen Weitz and his actors and Betsy were kind enough to help me out on my book tour, I was here in the fall of 2011 at an event at the Boulder bookstore, and two actors from the company came to my event and put on a couple of scenes from the play. And the scenes had been chosen with Stephen's help and his direction, so the event went over extremely well. And I thought, going back to him and trying to arrange a workshop situation would really help me get the play to a point where it could actually be performed, instead of just being a play on tape. And he agreed to that and got funding to hire a group of actors for a week and rent a rehearsal space. And we worked round the clock, and he really made suggestions I doubt I ever could have come to myself. And the play got stronger and stronger. And we've continued to work on it. It's had several more readings in the Denver area, in fact. It's been read to the American Physical Society, the Division of Planetary Sciences, and we had a public reading at the end of our workshop week. But we're still working on it. We actually spent all day today fussing, changing lines, changing the ending. It's remarkable to me how plastic a play is. And how when you actually start to work on it and have people in rehearsal, their interpretations of the lines open new possibilities. So people ask me if I'm now a playwright. I say, no, I don't want to write another play. I only ever wanted to write this play. And I'm so happy that I've done it and that it is now in the process of having a real production. And that tonight we can share a nice chunk of it with you.